Hi, and welcome to our presentation on the features of next-generation firewalls. Today, I'll walk you through the key components of both traditional and next-generation firewall setups by looking at architecture comparison. We'll then take a quick look at the advantages and disadvantages of next-generation firewalls. Following that, we'll walk through 3 demonstrations that build on one another to showcase key next-generation firewall capabilities. First, Aidan will demonstrate how next-generation firewalls can decrypt SSL traffic. Then I'll show how this decrypted traffic can be scanned for malware at the network perimeter before it ever reaches the host. Finally, Daniel will demonstrate how integrated IDPS features can detect and block misuse of ports, such as data exfiltration over DNS. In a traditional setup, traffic flows through a firewall that typically filters based only on IP addresses and ports. Behind the firewall, we usually have an IDPS monitoring network traffic and hosts running antivirus software. The main limitation here is that neither the firewall nor the IDPS can inspect the contents of encrypted traffic. This creates a blind spot for any threats hiding within SSL or TLS connections. In the next generation firewall setup shown here, incoming traffic first passes through a web proxy that decrypts SSL traffic. Once decrypted, the traffic is passed to both an antivirus scanner to detect known malware and an IDPS engine to identify potentially malicious behavior. The key advantage here is that threats can be blocked at the perimeter before they ever reach internal environment, rather than relying on host-based scanning or internal IDPS. So what's the benefit of a next-generation firewall? As mentioned before, it can detect malicious traffic and malware at the perimeter rather than once it's already been led into your network. As it has the ability to see the content of the encrypted traffic, it offers fine-grained controls to block or allow certain applications rather than just IP addresses and ports. Further, it can be integrated with identity services to apply even more granular rules based on which user the traffic is associated with. And lastly, it can be used as another layer in your defense in depth. But there are some downsides. As this requires SSL interception, you need to manage the certificates from the firewall so devices on your network trust it. And as you are now intercepting SSL traffic, there might be some privacy concerns if you're storing or logging private messages or banking information from employees. Next generation firewall are more resource intensive as they now need to decrypt traffic and scan content, whereas a traditional firewall is applying rules just based on IP addresses and ports, which is very quick. To overcome these bottlenecks, you might need better hardware, dedicated hardware, or multiple firewalls. For these demos, we will be using OPNsense and its plugins because it's free to use and also relatively straightforward to get the plugins working together. OPNsense uses Squid as web proxy, which can also be used to perform SSL decryption and interception. ClamAV antivirus can be used with OPNsense to scan for known malware. Suricata plugin is used as an IDPS. This may not be the most advanced setup, but it does the job of demonstrating the features of next-generation firewalls. In the case of Squid, again, we used it because it's free and integrates well with OPNsense. But as the professor noted recently, it's important to change default settings if you use it in real life. Otherwise, error pages can expose the tool and version. For demo purposes though, this visibility actually helps show where the traffic is being blocked. You'll see this in the first 2 demos.
Hi everyone. Now I'm going to show a demo of using OPNsense as a next-gen firewall. In this demo, I'm going to be using 2 virtual machines. One of them is OPNsense running the latest stable version, and the other is this Linux client here that we're logged into. Then using the Linux client, we're going to be able to log into OPNsense using this web console. So now we see the OPNsense dashboard, which looks just like a traditional firewall. And the next-gen functionality from OPNsense comes from the plugin that we installed in Services, which is called Squid Web Proxy. So this is what actually allows us to decrypt TLS traffic and give us that next-gen functionality where we can detect threats on the edge of the network, being the router. So here we can see what ports and what interfaces the Squid proxy is listening on. and we can test this out by going to example.com. So here it's just a regular internet connection, and we can use any URL on this at example.com. So then we can go into the access control lists, and we can disable anything even based on encrypted HTTP headers. For this to work, we need to restart the service. So we put in the blacklist API. So anything in the HTTP content that includes API will now be blocked. So we can see example.com/API was, now we get access denied. It even says that OPNsense and Squid was the reason. And it's important to note that API is not part of the host name. That's actually a HTTP header. So that's something that would normally be impossible to filter based on, because it would be encrypted by TLS. But the Next-Gen Firewall abilities gives us the ability to filter based on that. So how is this actually happening? OPNsense has the ability to also be a certificate authority, which we can see here under System Trust Authorities. You can see the CA that I made. Now if we go to example.com and we see the certificate for this website, we actually see that it's our cert. So example.com has the normal organization that you might expect, but the signing cert is our root cert made by OPNsense. So this is something that needs to be installed on the client VMs, or on the client machines, in order for them to trust these connections, and that's what allows OPNsense to decrypt TLS traffic. And we can see here that it is indeed using that CA. So that's OPNsense acting as a forward proxy and doing TLS decryption. Now I'm going to show another demo from the other perspective. So this is OPNsense working as a reverse proxy, also decrypting TLS. So here we have a web page on the local host, so 127.0.0.1. This is just a test web page I made. It's being served from this local host, so we're signed into the server right now. But from the server, we can also access OPNsense, and we can see that it has another service running called NGINX, which is another common reverse proxy. And we can see that NGINX is running on OPNsense, and it's listening on HTTPS. And it's listed under HTTPS servers as cyber210demo.com. So the benefit here is that this OPNsense can act as a load balancer. It can act as a TLS termination, all on the edge of the network. So none of that malicious traffic would ever reach into your actual server. It could be filtered here at the OPNsense level. And we're getting a warning here where we access this is accessing the website from the IP address of OPNsense. But the only reason we're getting that is because we didn't use DNS to access it. So we can change that to cyber210demo.com. I didn't set up DNS, so I just added it to etc hosts. And then we can go here. We're still going to the IP address of OPNsense, and now we get no cert errors at all.
As Aidan just demonstrated, a key capability of a next-generation firewall is SSL decryption. This means that encrypted traffic previously opaque to traditional firewalls can now be inspected in plain text by the next-generation firewall. From the earlier architecture diagram, we can see that once decrypted, the traffic can be passed to a virus scanner before it reaches the internal network. This is in contrast to a traditional firewall, which typically only filters traffic based on the IP address and port, leaving malware detection to host-based scanning. To demonstrate this, I'll use the ACAR test file, a harmless file that's recognized by all major antivirus scanners. It's specifically designed to safely test virus detection systems without using real malware. If we inspect the certificate, we can see it's signed by the website's actual certificate authority. This shows we are connecting straight to the website without the firewall. When connecting to the ACAR website without the firewall in place, I'm able to download the file and view its contents. In this case, it's a harmless string. At this point, a host-based antivirus would need to detect and block the file, assuming it's installed and up to date. Now, with OPNsense acting as a next-generation firewall and Squid performing SSL decryption, things work differently. First, you'll notice that the SSL certificate is now signed by the firewall and not the website certificate. So the firewall is intercepting and decrypting the SSL traffic. When I attempt to download the ACAR test file again, ClamAV integrated with the Squid proxy scans the traffic, detects the ACAR signature, and blocks the download before it reaches the client. I'll now hand over to Daniel, who will demonstrate how OPNsense using the Suricata IDPS plugin can detect and block port misuse, such as data exfiltration over DNS.
Hi everyone, my name is Daniel Sorto-Lazama and I'm going to be doing a quick demonstration of IDS and IPS integration in next-generation firewalls. So one of the key features of next-generation firewalls is that ability to perform network intrusion detection and prevention rather than having to rely on a separate appliance to fulfill these functions. So my demo environment has 4 VMs in it, and there's 2 networks, an untrusted and a trusted network. I've got a DNS server and my attacking machine in the untrusted network. Then in the trusted network, I've got my Ubuntu machine, which is my victim, and then the OPNsense firewall, which connects both of those together. So to demonstrate this, I'm going to be using a tool called DNSCat2. And what that's going to do is it's going to set up a DNS tunnel between that attacking machine and the victim, which is usually used in real world attacks for like command and control or data exfiltration, basically running a covert channel between 2 machines. So we're going to have the IDS IPS disabled at first, just so we can demo that tool without any kind of interruption or issues. So the first thing we do is we go on our Kali machine and we start that DNSCat2 server, which will then begin listening. And then we go on our client machine and we start the DNSCat2 client, which is pointed at my attacker's domain, which is attacker.tunnel.lab. And then once that session is established, we can see the active sessions here by typing in Windows. We're going to do window 1, and we're going to launch a shell session. And once we have that shell session launched, we can go ahead and interact with it, and we can send commands to that victim machine, like who am I? And it'll show who's currently logged into that machine, which is me. We can do pwd to see what directory we're in. And then we can do other commands. We can say date, for example, and see the current date. So now that we've seen our DNS tunnel, let's go ahead and go back into our Ubuntu machine and go into the OPNsense GUI. And we'll go ahead and enable the IPS, and it already has IPS mode enabled once that turns on. And then we'll go ahead and start trying to send some traffic again from our attacking machine. So in this case, let's go ahead and use cat to read the etc password file. And then we will go back to our firewall and see what it's come up with. So as we can see, now there's a whole lot of alerts here for traffic that's being blocked. And we can see right here that it's going to that attacking machine, which is 10.0.0.100 on the untrusted network on port 53, which is the port for DNS. So now the IPS IDS, which is Suricata, a plugin for OPNsense, is now blocking that traffic. And that's not to say that it blocks all of it, because DNS, obviously, that's a critical piece that the internet uses, and that traffic has to get through, and not every single piece of that malicious traffic is going to be able to match this rule that's being triggered. But In a real world situation, you'd be able to create custom rules. You can kind of tailor them specifically to the kind of traffic that you're seeing coming through your firewall. And if you have a situation like this where you can clearly see that there's one specific IP address or domain that is receiving all this bad traffic, then you could always just go and put in a firewall rule that just blocks all the traffic to that host. So this really is an advantage that these next generation firewalls have over traditional ones, because if you had a traditional firewall, it would just let all this DNS traffic through and you would be none the wiser while somebody, does some reconnaissance on your machine and can exfiltrate data and that sort of thing. So that brings us to the end of our demo. Thank you for your time, and I hope that it was informative and fun.